The hum of airplane engines and the soft murmur of conversations in the first-class cabin were abruptly shattered by a single, jarring act. As passengers settled into the plush seats of the luxurious cabin, a well-known flight attendant, Ms. Veronica Miles, strode down the aisle with a cold, imperious glare. Her eyes, narrowed in disdain, fixed on a black family quietly enjoying their journey. Without warning or explanation, Veronica barked, "You do not belong here," and with a swift, aggressive motion, she forcefully escorted the family out of first class. A collective gasp swept through the cabin. The family, comprising a determined mother, a proud father, and two wide-eyed children, were left reeling. The mother clutched her daughter's hand, while the father's face burned with a mix of shock and indignation. In that split second, what should have been a peaceful journey turned into a public spectacle of cruelty. Passengers, once engaged in casual conversation or reading, now exchanged bewildered and angry glances. Phones were whipped out, and video cameras began rolling as the shocking scene unfolded. Amid the rising chaos, an unexpected interruption came, a clear, resolute phone call made from one of the passengers. The calm, measured voice on the other end of that call, which would soon reverberate through every corner of the aircraft and beyond, promised accountability. In that moment, the question that burned in every mind was, who was behind that phone call, and how could a single call bring down an authority figure who had so brazenly abused their power? The tension was palpable, as the act of unprovoked aggression set the stage for a dramatic reversal. What no one could have anticipated was that this very call would expose not only the flight attendant's hidden biases, but also a truth that would shake her to her core. The incident, initially a stark display of racism, was about to take an unexpected turn, a turning point that would challenge long-held assumptions about respect, authority, and identity. As the family was led away and the call echoed through the cabin, an air of expectancy and defiance took hold. The seeds of transformation had been sown in that brief, electrifying moment, leaving everyone to wonder what fate awaited those who dared to mistreat the innocent. Before we go any further, subscribe to the channel and comment below where you're watching from. High above the earth, in the exclusive realm of first-class service, the interior of Skylux Airlines' flagship jet exuded opulence and modern elegance. Gleaming mahogany accents, soft ambient lighting, and ergonomically designed seats set a scene of comfort and luxury for the elite travelers. The cabin was designed to offer a sanctuary of peace and sophistication, a microcosm of the world's best service and diversity. Yet on this fateful flight, the pristine atmosphere was about to be marred by an act that would soon ignite a fierce public debate. At the heart of the drama was Mrs. Evelyn Carter, a dignified elderly black woman in her early 70s. Known throughout her community for her quiet strength and unwavering kindness, Evelyn had traveled for years, her presence always a symbol of resilience and grace. Today, she had chosen to fly first class as a reward for a lifetime of hard work, a small luxury she allowed herself despite a past marred by hardship. Dressed in a simple, elegant dress and wearing her silver hair in a neat style, Evelyn exuded a warmth that had touched countless lives. Opposing her, at least in that moment, was Ms. Veronica Miles, a seasoned flight attendant with a reputation for strict adherence to protocol and a demeanor that bordered on imperiousness. Veronica, in her mid-30s, prided herself on maintaining the highest standards aboard the flight. However, behind her polished uniform and rehearsed smiles lay a set of prejudices that had festered over the years. Her interactions, though outwardly professional, were tainted by an unspoken bias, a bias that today would lead her to target Evelyn and her family without a moment's hesitation. The family that found themselves at the center of this unfolding controversy consisted of Mr. Henry Carter, a quiet yet proud man in his late 50s, and their two children, a precocious daughter and a curious son. Henry, a retired teacher known for his fairness and gentle wisdom, had always encouraged his children to stand up for what is right. Their bond, forged in years of shared struggle and mutual respect, was evident in the way they clung together during moments of uncertainty. The setting of Skylux Airlines First Class was designed to impress. Expansive windows offered breathtaking views of the clouds, and the soft hum of the engines provided a constant reminder of the marvel of flight. But on this particular day, the harmonious scene was disrupted by a confrontation that threatened to unravel the fabric of respect and decency. Passengers from various walks of life looked on in horror as Veronica's harsh actions clashed with the quiet dignity of Evelyn and the supportive presence of her family. Outside the aircraft, the world moved on unaware that within the luxurious cabin, a battle of ideals was taking place. The modern, cosmopolitan nature of first-class travel, which was meant to celebrate diversity, stood in stark contrast to the narrow, prejudiced actions of one individual. In the eyes of many, this was a turning point, a moment that would force the community to confront the enduring specter of racism in even the most elite settings. As whispers of the incident began to circulate, both within the cabin and beyond, it became clear that this was not merely an isolated act of aggression. The stage was set for a dramatic reversal, a transformation that would see the tables turned and the true nature of those involved revealed. In the immediate chaos that followed the assault, the luxurious first-class cabin was plunged into an uneasy silence. Passengers huddled in their seats, murmuring in disbelief as the video of the incident quickly began to circulate on social media. Officer, or rather, the flight attendant, Veronica Miles continued to insist that her actions were justified, claiming that Evelyn Carter had violated some obscure regulation or disrupted the order of the cabin. Her voice, though loud and commanding at first, soon wavered as a chorus of eyewitness accounts contradicted her version of events. Multiple passengers recalled that Evelyn had been quietly reading a book and exchanging warm greetings with fellow travelers, her demeanor nothing short of graceful. The fact that she was simply there, enjoying a well-deserved moment of tranquility, made Veronica's aggressive outbursts seem even more unwarranted. One passenger, a young professional seated near the back of the cabin, whispered to a companion, she was just enjoying her flight. What did she ever do to deserve that? His words, caught on a hastily recorded video, spread quickly online, fueling a growing public outrage. Within minutes, the internal affairs of Skylux Airlines were alerted to the incident. A senior manager arrived on the scene, and soon the cabin was swarming with supervisors and security personnel trying to piece together what had happened. Meanwhile, social media exploded with the hashtags #JusticeForEvelyn and #StandUpAgainstRacism. The incident had transformed from an isolated act of misconduct into a full-blown public relations nightmare. The conflict deepened as witnesses began to recount that this was not the first time Veronica Miles had targeted a passenger on the basis of race. Rumors circulated among the crew and passengers that similar complaints had been made against her in the past, complaints that had been quietly dismissed by her supervisors. This revelation added a layer of systemic injustice to the unfolding drama, suggesting that the bias was not a momentary lapse, but a chronic issue. As internal investigators began to gather evidence, including video footage from the cabin cameras and testimonials from shocked passengers, the atmosphere inside first class became one of mounting tension. The families and individuals who had once felt safe and pampered on Skylux flights now looked around with wary eyes, wondering how such an act of cruelty could occur in what was supposed to be an elite environment. Evelyn Carter, despite the pain on her cheek, was attended to by compassionate crew members and even offered water and blankets by fellow passengers. Yet, her calm expression and quiet resilience only served to highlight the stark contrast with Veronica's aggressive stance. At one point, a senior crew member whispered to another, "This isn't just about one act. It's about an attitude that has no place here." The internal conflict was not confined to just the passengers. Even within the airline's hierarchy, there was growing discontent about the flight attendants' conduct. The evidence gathered painted a damning picture. Digital logs from the cabin cameras showed that Evelyn had behaved in a manner that was completely in line with the airline's code of conduct. Eyewitness testimonies from multiple passengers and crew members corroborated this, and the internal records revealed that complaints against Veronica Miles had been filed before, though never thoroughly investigated. As the investigation into the incident took hold, the tension outside the cabin was equally intense. Local news outlets picked up the story, and soon the incident became a flashpoint for discussions about racism in customer service and the responsibilities of those in positions of authority. The public outcry reached a fever pitch, and community leaders called for immediate accountability and reform. The once quiet buzz of conversation in the cabin was now replaced by a chorus of demands for justice and transparency. By the end of the day, what had begun as a single, shocking act had transformed into a symbol of systemic failure. The evidence was overwhelming, and every shared video clip and eyewitness account added to the chorus demanding that the airline and the authorities take decisive action. The stage was set for the dramatic escalation that would follow, as the public and internal investigators prepared to confront the deep-seated biases that had allowed such an injustice to occur. In the days following the incident, the public reaction was swift and unyielding. Social media platforms lit up with outrage. Videos of the assault were viewed millions of times, and hashtags like #JusticeForEvelyn trended across the nation. Community leaders and civil rights organizations organized protests and vigils, calling for systemic change in the way airlines treated their passengers. The once revered image of Skylux Airlines was now under intense scrutiny, and demands for accountability grew louder by the hour. Inside Skylux Airlines, the management scrambled to address the fallout. An emergency internal investigation was launched, led by senior manager Carla Ortiz, a respected figure known for her commitment to fairness. Ortiz convened a meeting with senior staff, during which digital evidence, including cabin camera footage and passenger testimonials, was reviewed in excruciating detail. "This behavior is unacceptable and cannot be allowed to continue," she stated firmly, her voice echoing in the boardroom. Her words resonated deeply with a group of younger employees who had long been disillusioned by what they saw as a culture of indifference to discrimination. The investigation uncovered that this was not an isolated incident. Internal records revealed that Veronica Miles had been the subject of multiple prior complaints regarding her conduct toward passengers of color, complaints that had been routinely dismissed without proper action. This discovery ignited a firestorm within the airline's ranks and provided undeniable proof that the issue was systemic. As the internal investigation gathered momentum, news of the unfolding scandal spread rapidly to local and national media. High-profile interviews with civil rights leaders and outraged passengers further amplified the outcry. In the midst of the media frenzy, a particularly damning piece of evidence emerged. A detailed report compiled from passenger surveys and internal memos that clearly documented a pattern of discriminatory behavior by Veronica Miles. The report was released to the public, and it sent shockwaves through the community. The public's demand for justice was now backed by hard evidence. Outside the airplane, protests broke out in front of the airline's headquarters. Crowds of diverse community members, holding signs that read, "No racism in the skies," and "Respect all passengers," gathered to demand that Skylux Airlines take immediate and decisive action. The intensity of the protest was matched only by the vigor of the internal investigation. The public sentiment was clear. If the airline did not reform, it risked losing the trust of the very people it was meant to serve. Meanwhile, within the airline, tension was mounting among the employees. Some flight attendants and ground staff, who had witnessed the incident firsthand, began to speak out, sharing their own experiences of biased treatment by Veronica Miles. Their voices, once stifled by fear of reprisal, grew louder as the internal culture began to shift. In a series of candid conversations, a few brave employees remarked, "We have always known something was wrong. Now, we have proof, and it is time to stand together for change." Their testimonies were recorded and shared in internal meetings, further bolstering the case for reform. Senior manager Carla Ortiz took the initiative to arrange a press conference. Standing before a throng of reporters and community representatives at the airline's headquarters, She detailed the findings of the investigation. "We are committed to ensuring that every passenger is treated with the utmost respect," Ortiz declared. "The evidence is clear. Discriminatory practices have no place at Skylux Airlines. We are taking swift action to hold those responsible accountable and to implement new training programs designed to foster a culture of inclusivity and respect." Her announcement was met with resounding applause from both the press and community members who had gathered outside. In the days that followed, pressure on the airline's board grew insurmountable. Investors, regulators, and even government officials began to call for sweeping reforms. The incident had not only damaged the airline's reputation, but had also ignited a national conversation about the need for accountability in customer service. Every new development, from leaked internal emails to testimonials from affected passengers, added to the sense that change was both necessary and imminent. By the time the investigation was nearing its conclusion, Skylux Airlines was at a crossroads. The mounting evidence and public outcry left no doubt that the behavior exhibited by Veronica Miles was not an isolated anomaly, but a reflection of deeper, systemic issues. The department's internal review had transformed into a powerful movement demanding transparency and reform, and it was clear that the actions taken in the coming days would have far-reaching consequences for the airline and its leadership. Every day, as more evidence was unveiled and public support grew louder, the tension inside the company and across the community reached a boiling point. The combined forces of internal accountability and public demand had set the stage for a dramatic turning point, a moment when the entrenched culture of discrimination would finally be challenged head-on. The decisive moment arrived on a crisp afternoon during a high-stakes board meeting held in the grand conference room of Skylux Airlines headquarters. The room was filled with senior executives, legal advisors, community representatives, and local media, all gathered to hear the final outcome of the internal investigation. With a calm yet authoritative presence, Senior Manager Carla Ortiz stepped to the podium. After an exhaustive review of all the evidence, Ortiz began, her voice firm and unwavering. "It is clear that the actions of flight attendant Veronica Miles were driven solely by personal bias and are completely unacceptable." A heavy silence fell over the room as her words resonated with everyone present. "Effective immediately, Veronica Miles is suspended from duty pending a full disciplinary review," she continued. "This decision is not only a measure to correct one egregious act. It is a commitment to ensuring that every member of our community is treated with respect and dignity." At that moment, a quiet voice from the back of the room broke through the stillness. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, the victim of the assault, rose slowly. Despite the pain still evident on her face, her posture remained unbowed, and her eyes shone with a quiet determination that had defined her life. "I have lived with grace and dignity all my life," she said softly but clearly. "Today, I stand as a testament to the fact that no one, not even those in uniform, is above accountability. Let this be the turning point for our community, a moment when justice prevails over hate." Her words struck a deep chord, and a wave of approval and applause swept through the room. The turning point was sealed when Inspector David Ramirez presented a comprehensive dossier of evidence, a compilation of digital logs, security footage, internal memos, and eyewitness testimonies that documented flight attendant Miles's long history of discriminatory behavior. Each piece of evidence reinforced the undeniable truth that her actions were not an isolated lapse, but part of a troubling pattern. As the dossier was laid out before the assembly, even those who had previously defended her began to acknowledge the depth of the injustice. The final verdict, delivered by the Internal Affairs Panel, left no room for doubt. The unanimous decision to suspend Veronica Miles sent a clear message. Prejudice and discrimination would no longer be tolerated. The weight of the decision, combined with the heartfelt testimony of Mrs. Carter and the resolute tone of Senior Manager Ortiz, marked a dramatic reversal in the balance of power. For the first time, the authority of those who had long upheld a biased status quo was being challenged by the unyielding force of accountability. In that moment, as Officer Miles's once arrogant expression gave way to shock and remorse. The entire room seemed to exhale in relief. The turning point had not only vindicated Mrs. Carter, but had also ignited a powerful call for systemic reform at Skylux Airlines. The decision was more than a disciplinary action. It was a declaration that every individual, regardless of their position, must be held to the highest standard of conduct. The legacy of that moment promised to reshape not only the airline's practices, but also the broader conversation about equality and justice. In the wake of the landmark decision, Skylux Airlines began to implement sweeping reforms that reverberated throughout the company and the community at large. News of flight attendant Veronica Miles's suspension and the internal affairs panel's findings spread quickly. Local media praised the airline for taking swift, decisive action against discrimination, and social media platforms buzzed with support for Mrs. Evelyn Carter and calls for accountability in customer service. Mrs. Carter, though still bearing the marks of that painful encounter, emerged as a beacon of resilience. In the weeks that followed, she participated in community forums and spoke at public events, urging people to stand together against injustice. Her dignified manner and unwavering resolve inspired many, turning her into a symbol of hope for those who had long faced discrimination. Her story sparked a wider movement demanding that all institutions, whether in the skies or on the ground, uphold the values of fairness and respect. Within Skylux Airlines, Senior Manager Carla Ortiz and Lieutenant Marcus Daniels spearheaded a series of internal reforms. New training programs on cultural sensitivity, ethical behavior, and unbiased service were rolled out for every employee. Policies were revised to ensure that any complaint of discriminatory behavior would be investigated thoroughly and transparently. Officers and flight attendants were now required to undergo regular evaluations to ensure that the company's high standards of respect and professionalism were maintained. The changes were communicated clearly, and internal meetings were held to discuss how to rebuild trust with both employees and customers. Officer Veronica Miles's case became a pivotal lesson for the company, a reminder that no one, regardless of their tenure or position, was above accountability. Her suspension, widely covered in local news and discussed in community meetings, served as a catalyst for change. Employees who had once feared retribution for speaking out now found a supportive environment where fairness was paramount. The internal culture of Skylux began to shift, and many staff members expressed optimism that these changes would usher in a new era of inclusive and respectful service. Public sentiment mirrored the internal transformations. Protests and rallies outside the airline's headquarters brought together a diverse coalition of citizens, civil rights advocates, and former passengers demanding that discrimination in all its forms be eradicated. Banners bearing slogans such as "Justice in the Skies" and "Every Passenger Matters" were hoisted, and community leaders pledged to monitor the progress of the reforms closely. The incident had not only exposed a deep flaw in the system, but had also united people in a common cause. In one final community gathering, held in the public square outside City Hall, Lieutenant Daniels addressed a large, diverse crowd. Today, we have witnessed that accountability is not just a word. It is a commitment to every individual in our community, he declared. We will continue to work tirelessly to ensure that no act of discrimination goes unchallenged. Let us stand together in the promise of a future where respect and dignity are the foundations of our service. His words were met with enthusiastic applause, and the mood was one of cautious hope. As the days turned into weeks, Skylux Airlines began to rebuild its reputation. Customers returned with renewed confidence, knowing that the airline was serious about reform. The painful events of that day had set in motion a movement for change that reached far beyond a single act of injustice. Central City and its residents now looked forward to a future defined by fairness, transparency, and respect for all. The legacy of that fateful incident, marked by the courageous stand of Mrs. Carter and the resolute action of internal affairs, would serve as a lasting beacon. It was a testament to the fact that even in the face of deep-seated prejudice, a single, courageous act can ignite a revolution. As Skylux Airlines and Central City moved forward, the promise of lasting change shone brightly. A reminder that justice, once pursued relentlessly, has the power to transform not only institutions but entire communities.